Artificial intelligence could increase the wealth gap between rich and poor countries. A new report by the United Nations claims that AI could accelerate global inequality if left unchecked. And they say that could spell trouble for all countries. Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, AI has the potential to change everything, everywhere, including the imbalance between nations. The technology may be racing ahead, but some countries are barely even at the start line. Weak connectivity, unreliable power. They're just two of the issues holding them back. So, if action isn't taken, just how big will the gap get?
Artificial intelligence is redrawing the global map of opportunity and risk. And nowhere is this more visible than in Asia and the Pacific.
A warning by UN leaders from the Global South that the world's readiness to share the benefits of AI isn't keeping pace. Focusing on the Asia and Pacific region as its case study, a UN report notes that artificial intelligence could either bridge the gap in human development or drive a new great divergence between countries, and even within individual nations. The report specifically highlights the inequality in reliable energy distribution, internet connectivity, and skills deserts. It warns that AI development may stall and leave vast sectors of society behind.
This AI gap must be addressed. If not, it will create two distinct realities. One for those who shape AI, and another by those who are shaped by it.
The cautionary tale comes less than 3 months on from the UN Secretary General's comments on the need for countries to work closely towards AI equality.
For the first time, every country will have a seat at the table of AI. The trajectory of artificial intelligence will depend on our readiness to listen, to adapt, and to cooperate across borders and disciplines. And that work starts here, with all of you.
Countries like the USA and China already hold nearly 3/4 of global AI investment and dominates access to computing power and data. But will their head start drive global progress, or simply set the terms of it?
Well, let's bring in our guests who are all here with me in the studio. Rohit Talwar is a global futurist and the founder of Fastfuture. Isabel Serval, a Foresight strategist at Traversing Futures in London, and Kelsey Farish, a lawyer specialising in artificial intelligence. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Kelsey, to you first of all, this is all quite depressingly predictable, isn't it? The rich getting richer, the poor staying where they are.
I mean, I think it's both depressing and predictable. AI, I think it's going to exacerbate and amplify the discrepancies that are already existing, whether they're social, financial, technological, or otherwise. So nothing in the report really surprises me.
Isabel, you can't have been shocked by what you read.
No, I'm indeed not shocked. But anything that pulls out inequities in the world is obviously always very welcome. It is, to me, also very interesting that in the report, AI is treated as absolutely a force for good and something that everybody must have, whether they are in the backwaters of Vietnam or deepest Papua New Guinea. And it doesn't really question what for. So I look forward to talking about that a little bit more today.
And we shall. Rohit, just give us your impressions on the report. How concerned are you about the gap widening?
I think, as everyone else has said, the gap is huge and AI is likely to exacerbate it, but that's nothing new. And it's the same with any technological development. It's just the scale of it now, that every technological development, we start with this, oh, it can make life better for humanity, it could help with education and healthcare. And then you see that the prime focus is on, well, where can we make money with it? And now this debate about the impact on poorer communities, lower income countries, is really being driven by the tech companies. They're the ones who are putting $1 trillion+ into the infrastructure for AI. and almost making it essential for governments to say, well, we've got to be in this game. And that's causing a real issue for a lot of countries. If you look at the big four tech companies, they're investing roughly $100 billion a year each on AI. There's only 70 countries in the world that have a bigger GDP. So for most countries, this puts them in a really difficult position. The number of actions being set out in the report is just bigger than a brainful. It's 108 pages, which means no minister's ever going to read it. It's going to go to some analyst and they'll summarize it. And no analyst wants to lose their job by saying, we need to fundamentally change everything about our country, which is the implication of the report. And so I think they've missed an opportunity to be really hard-hitting. And from my perspective, I think there is this assumption that AI is going to be dominant, and it probably will be very central to most economies. But I think a lot of countries won't survive it. They can't afford to spend $2, $3, $5 billion putting in AI infrastructure. So they're going to become heavily dependent on other countries to provide it, or tech companies. And how do you fund that? We could see a model start to emerge where effectively they become vassal states, a cluster around China where they get everything for China. What do they give back to China in return? Does China become a shareholder? Do they get 20% of all the revenues of that country? Or does IBM or Microsoft become a shareholder for a country because they're providing all the infrastructure? I think this is so fundamental. It really starts to challenge the whole notion of governance, sovereignty, and how countries evolve. And my perspective is when you look at the numbers, GDP and all sorts of other development indicators, if AI reaches its full potential, I think that's probably the end of independence for 30 to 50 countries. They just won't have the resources to be able to survive.
Thanks, Rohit. Kelsey, how sad is this then that the phrase Rohit just used, vassal states, that some countries will be so far behind, it's not even worth them getting in the race?
I think it's a really interesting point. And one of the things that I often tell my clients when they come to me and say, Kelsey, can we use this tool? And if we do use this AI tool, is it ethical? I kind of sit back and I say, well, I'm a lawyer. I'll tell you what the law says. I unfortunately can't tell you what's ethical because there are a lot of things that are unethical, perhaps, but are legal. And vice versa. And so what I have to explain is, exactly as you said a moment ago, just because the AI is there, it doesn't necessarily mean you should use it. And if you do decide to use it, we can't forget that there's a very complex tension between these very powerful companies headed up by very wealthy individuals, and they are going to have a profit-driven approach, whereas governments, educators, people in healthcare, they're not necessarily driven by profit. They're there to protect consumers, audiences, children, etc. So we can't really make decisions about AI until we step back and ask, what is making me feel uncomfortable? As soon as we know it makes us feel uncomfortable, things like lack of education, lack of infrastructure, then we can focus in on those particular pain points. I have a little bit of I take umbrage, I think, with the report because it uses a lot of words like fairness or transparency, but what does that mean in practice? And it's really difficult because those are different things, those mean different things in different cultures and different contexts as well.
Isabel, to you, what you said earlier on, is it a force for good? I mean, everyone's seeing it as this kind of panacea, cure-all pill. It's quite clear it's not.
No, I don't think it is. I like that the report does really focus on equity by design. It's well intended, but this obviously, who owns it is the big question. And I would actually be very curious what we can do, because as you say, Kelsey, the big five in the West, at least, are taking all the profit, and there is a big financial bubble at the moment around AI. So whether it really will expand as it is, or follow on the same trajectory, we don't actually know, because I do a little search online and will the AI bubble burst? And you will get to quite some interesting content around maybe not, because all the faults with the investments, all the mess behind the scenes is hidden in the financial markets. And this could go very differently very soon. But also, can we legislate the LLM tools that we have now? We use this big bracket, right? AI, artificial intelligence. Let's keep in mind that it's clever maths. It's really good maths based on very big data. And it isn't actually artificially intelligent. We have tremendous workforces, mainly in Kenya and India, who are doing very, very, very human work, often looking at very violent content for many hours a day, getting paid almost nothing. And maybe from a legal perspective, what can we do as nations or even as citizens to change this? Because as soon as we do understand that this can't be legal, we can't have this force for good that is based on near slave labor. And we haven't even then talked about, okay, but does every child need an AI tutor? And in many Western countries, we're talking about our adults and children having closer relationships with a chatbot than with each other. So if that is our development benchmark, is that somewhere we really want to get to?
We want to be there.
Right.
Rohit, to you, talk me through the problems then that poorer countries have. I'm guessing connectivity is one, perhaps power supply. What's holding them back, in your opinion?
Well, across the planet, we've got issues around access to even continuous power, clean water. 2.5 billion people still don't have regular access to the internet or any. And the countries that the energy supply, all of these are essential to the effective running of the kind of data centers you need. Certainly with the current generative AI stuff, which is just bigger and bigger all the time, but it isn't going to get to what Isabel was talking about, this artificial general intelligence that is genuinely a machine having intelligence, that you're going to have a different path to that, which might not consume as much power. But right now, a huge number of countries just couldn't support that. I think socially there's a big challenge that for a lot of countries, if you've got a population of 2 or 3 million or less, which is a lot of countries, it's unlikely that anyone is going to build a generative AI solution, a large language model for your language. So they're going to have English imposed on them. And AI, if they're going to get these services from the big tech companies, it means that they're going to have to work in English. It means that the education models will be ones that are chosen by those players. They won't get the tailoring to the local culture, the local history. And that sort of accelerates, I think, the demise and homogenization of cultures. And I think that's a very deep and fundamental issue. You've also got a lot of states where there's a very strong kind of religious element. How that sits with this, I don't know. The thing that Isabel talked about, where a lot of the jobs that are being created are people in Kenya or wherever just marking up text from the internet so it can be used in these engines. I think there's so many issues there, and it's bigger than a brainful for most countries, because sort of hidden between the lines of the report is you need to completely rethink how you run your country. And a lot of countries are not even aware that AI is going to be that big yet at ministerial level. The one bit of hope I can see, the best model I can see right now, is where they've taken a specific area, which is education. And it's actually being led by Hewlett-Packard. So they have a commercial intent behind it, but they are working with pretty much every country around the world, trying to help them get their heads around what AI is and how you can use it well in education and how you set up the capability from policy making through to students and guiding them. And I think you need that. I think it's really hard in the current environment to create solutions at a national level for everything. I think you're going to have to slice it up and look at it piece by piece. And for me, just sort of finally, there are 4 critical elements as far as I can see. One is awareness. Just, do you even know what this is? Then understanding. Then there's the education and skills piece, and there's financing. And the money is the biggest challenge, where if you don't have the money to do this, you're not going to be able to address all these things. And when we talk about issues like fairness and equity, that isn't even on the agenda in a lot of countries right now. to suddenly say, actually, you need to think about this, is in itself a huge debate, let alone how you then build that into your systems.
Kelsey, I saw one incredible story that did make me laugh. Tiny Caribbean nation of Anguilla. Their domain name is .ai. And they are making an absolute killing off the back of companies wanting to buy domain names. Yeah. So you launch Kelsey Farish AI and you want to buy the domain name .ai. I mean, it's absolutely ingenious. There is one nation that is doing very well out of it.
Yeah, it's quite lucky, isn't it? You see this before the name of the new pope is announced, right? Well, it's domain name squatting, isn't it? No, it's a great marketing tool for sure. I have some clients with very similar sounding names, .ai, and yeah, it gets confusing to keep it all straight in my head. But I just wanted to return to something Rohit said, which was, the length of the report. It was over 100 pages long, and how are we going to expect very busy policymakers to read it and understand it? When I work with clients, a lot of production companies, a lot of broadcasters, in my role as a media lawyer, they often tell me, Kelsey, can you write us a responsible use AI policy? And if I give them a 20-page policy, that's barely scratching the surface of how AI, generative AI or otherwise, should be used in their organization. People want flowcharts. They want, if this, then that. What should we do in practice? It's not because, people aren't wanting to follow the rules. It's that the rules are complex and they're nuanced. And we don't yet have a framework for how to approach AI, because it differs, right? You have to understand what the context is. And if we just throw more words and, touchy-feeling, hopes and wishes, it's not going to stick. It's just not going to stick. Organizations are struggling with this. Governments are going to struggle with this. So it's a very big, complicated issue. And I don't think we can just throw more policies and legislation at it. And I say that as a lawyer.
Isabel, if you were to be advising on policy, then to kind of bridge the gap or to stop it widening, what kind of things would you like to see companies and countries doing?
Yeah, there's quite a lot, but I think it would be interesting for us to have a moment. Also, this was an APAC report, so let's look at China. They are by far, I think, the biggest player, especially as a nation in the world, and they're also a huge nation. And their AI rollout and focus is completely different from in the West. Well, of course, they do long-term planning very well. They are also the first who actually hacked out rules that actually make sense for everyone who works in Chinese bureaucracy and anybody who works within anything that touches, right? So wherever Alibaba is, that will apply. So this is very effective, and they do legislate very well. Now, for policy systems, I think we need to look at big algorithmic solutions. Maybe let's stop calling everything AI, because it's a bit confusing at some point. When we look at early disaster warning systems, when we look at monitoring like biosphere or like nature and preserving nature, these systems are incredible. And also in cities managing traffic flows. So in China, they're far more focused on embodied AI than we are. In the West, we're really focused on chatbots or stochastic parrots that, can do a certain amount of stuff for you, but it's not really in the physical world as much. And in China, because there's such a strong manufacturing power, they can actually work more on robotics, like artificial intelligence in robotics, and also in the physical environment, so more in the ways that you interact with it. So I think that's good to be aware of, that for us, when we talk about the influence of AI, I'm sat here in London, and we think of Silicon Valley, and we think of those big tech companies, and that is one side. And there is another, and it is, while I agree with you, Rohit, that it's a risk that everything is controlled out of Silicon Valley and Englishified, we do see a lot more distribution now, and Arabic language models, Swahili, Turkish language models, they are taking off, and there are more distributed, independent, thanks to open source Chinese technology. It is actually easier for other technology companies to break through. Like, I don't have to rely on a chatbot from the United States anymore. I use Taura.ai, which is made by Syrian refugees and has completely different It just clearly states we want to save as much energy as we can. We want to be less polluting. We protect your privacy. We don't train data with anything that you say. We are decolonized. They have a very specific political stance, and they're very open about it. So you can try it out, you know. So as far as chatbots go, I think that this is really, the landscape is changing. Where it's going to go, we have to see. And in terms of policy in the UK or in Europe, we need to look at countries like Singapore. It's a small country, which is easier, and they're very incredibly well managed. But they do incredibly well with Pair AI, which is their public service digital assistant. That's quite well trained, but public servants actually like using it.
Rohit, the report focuses in on Asia Pacific as one huge region. 55% of the global population there, but it does point out you've got China, Japan and Singapore who are so far ahead of everyone else.
Absolutely. And I would add Korea to that group. I think they mentioned
South Korea, I'm guessing.
Yeah. And that's, yeah. Although we don't really know what's going on in North Korea, but my guess is they are also moving at pace. And yeah, you do have these countries that are so far ahead. And that sort of, if you like, talks to the issue that we were discussing earlier, which is what do smaller countries do? Do they try and build all that infrastructure? Take somewhere like India. Right now, there are language models being built, but we've got 23 languages. And so are we going to do it in every language? And if you take countries with a population of 100,000, 200,000, even 1 million, are we going to tailor these things? Not just the generative AI bit, but the rest of it.
So what does India do? You've got a country that is so broad and populous and diverse in so many languages. Which language will be the language of AI if you are Narendra Modi advising business and saying, this is what I want?
Well, right now the default is English, and then stuff in Hindi, Gujarati. So there are things emerging, and it won't be one language. That you have to have 3 or 4 languages just because of the diversity of the population. India is trying to do a lot in government using AI, just because government is so big. There are so many levels of bureaucracy, and to speed up decision making and to speed up action, they're seeing AI as a big enabler of that. And it's a very tech-centric culture. So I'm in chat groups where literally every day someone is telling me about some other crazy development that's happening there that is trying to take a 2 or 3 year leap, not by using generative AI, but just by using all the data we've got to say, can we do better weather prediction to help subsistence farmers? Can we find better ways of providing treatment to the 25% of Indian towns and villages that don't have doctors or teachers? So not using generative AI, but just saying, can we use machine intelligence? Can we predict what might be required based on all the data we've got? So I think that's the challenge now for every country, is to say, what can we do? And what does a good roadmap look like for us that starts with education? Just starts with people understanding what this is and why it's fundamentally different. And then understanding things like artificial general intelligence, which is potentially going to be as smart as humans, and ultimately artificial superintelligence and hyperintelligence, where to get people understanding that this technology could emerge in the next few years, that means we'll end up automating before we educate unless we act now. And that's, I think, a real challenge for leaders to get their heads around that, not just in government, but in business.
Thanks, Rohit. Kelsey, on the point Rohit makes about education, we've got all these political leaders and business leaders making huge decisions. Do you think they know enough about it?
No, they absolutely do not. And what's happening too is that even the experts and legal advisors like myself, we don't know a lot about it because AI cuts across so many different horizontal and vertical layers. What makes sense in one context, like I said a moment ago, doesn't necessarily make sense in another. And there's just there's information overload. People are struggling with overwhelm. It's really difficult to understand what might make sense in one context as opposed to another. And just, we've spoken a little bit about language. Now, as someone who negotiates contracts for a living with media and film companies and so on, I always say law is a language of detail. You know, lawyers, they spend hours choosing the perfect words for a contract. I mean, when we're talking about even just English translations between American English and British English, you know, so many things get lost in the weeds, right? If I say something like, yes, my belief is concrete, the sentence, yes, my belief is cement, doesn't make any sense, even though concrete and cement, they mean kind of the same thing, right? Why am I stressing this point? Because if the decision makers, if the business makers have in their mind, okay, this is what I mean by transparency or fairness or access, that's just their interpretation. When it filters through government, when it filters through education systems, it could be interpreted so many different ways. And if there's something that lawyers don't like, it's uncertainty, because that leads to lawsuits as people try to figure it out. What is it going to mean if Sam Altman or Elon Musk, if they're the ones deciding what words mean, what legislation means, and so on?
Thanks, Kelsey. Isabel, final point to you. Just come in on that. It strikes me that an awful lot more education is needed about AI. We're at the beginning of what is going to be a long journey.
Absolutely. Exactly to your point, that AI literacy is not about how good people are at using certain tools. That should be fairly intuitive over time. It is really about understanding who owns what you are putting your thoughts, your labor, and your IP into, your intellectual property into.
Isabel, thank you. Rohit Talwar and Kelsey Farish as well here with me in the studio. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.